Welcome to If I Could Say One More Thing, a podcast where stories explore the words left unspoken, the moments that linger, and the what-ifs that never quite fade. Through fiction, we step into the spaces between what happened and what might have been. Airports are funny places. Everyone's arriving or leaving. Nobody's really there. But sometimes, what you take home isn't what you expected. In the first story of Season 2, we meet Maya, a woman who picks up the wrong suitcase and discovers, inside, not confusion, but a glimpse into another life. A notebook filled with recipes, playlists, and quiet grief. What begins as a mistake becomes an intimate trespass and a small act of connection between two people who will never meet. This is The Wrong Suitcase. By the time I noticed the suitcase wasn't mine, I had already congratulated myself on being the sort of person who never makes mistakes in public. I had marched straight off the plane and onto the little conveyor belt stage, plucked the black rectangular with the jaunty red ribbon, and wheeled it away like a competent woman at the start of a shampoo commercial. This is a dangerous kind of confidence. It tempts the gods who, despite rumors to the contrary, are bored and do not care about shampoo. At home, the zipper resisted me with a stubborn chastity belt energy. My first thought was that I had been robbed by an unusually conscientious thief, the kind who not only steals your things, but replaces them with extra spoils just to prove a point. My second was more troubling. Why did my hand cream suddenly smell like bay leaves? When the lid flapped open, I saw 3 button-down shirts lined up like shy beetles and a pair of shoes that had never met my feet or my ideas about shoes. Under those, a neatly folded apron, the kinds chefs wear in movies about redemption. On top of the apron sat a notebook, black cover, corners softened from travel, elastic band resigned to its fate. I did what any respectable person would do. I called the airline. "You've reached baggage irregularities," said a very calm voice, as if baggage had a consistent personality problem. "Are you in physical possession of the irregularity?" "I am," I said. Irregularity is exactly the word I would have chosen if I had trained for this. "Tag number?" There was a paper loop on the handle, scabbed with previous stickers. The current one read LCYFCOTRS and a 5-digit number. The last 2 digits, a smug little 13. No name, just the airport genealogy and a number that did not belong to me. "We'll log it," the woman said, cheerfully, doomed. "In the meantime, could you please provide me with your baggage claim number?" I did, then asked, "Has the irregularity, who I assume has my suitcase, called in?" "Not yet," she said, a dry smile in her voice. but most probably he will as soon as he realizes. At that point, we'll send someone to pick his bag up and return yours, likely tomorrow. And just like that, the ending had already been written. A simple exchange. His life back to him, mine back to me. Still, I looked down at the apron and the notebook and felt that present tremor one gets when picking up a book from a library cart and finding one's name already inside. Don't, I told myself. You have no right. Rights, it turned out, are elastic. They stretch easily for the curious and snap back hard on the righteous. I opened the notebook. On the first page, written in a small, patient hand, recipes that behave, playlists for endurance, notes to self that may or may not help. Below that, a date from 2 months earlier, a list of songs. Heroes, Lark Ascending, Nessun Dorma, a touch dramatic. Benny and the Jets, A Change Is Gonna Come. Take 5. And then came Sinner Man, which made my heart do a little polite somersault. I turned another page. Pasta with anchovies and breadcrumbs, for nights when you've disappointed yourself but still require nourishment. The instructions were plain. Toast breadcrumbs in olive oil with garlic until they smell like your grandmother's kitchen in July. Push to the side of the pan. Melt anchovies in the oil. Ignore the smell for the first 30 seconds. Believe in the alchemy. Add chili flakes, lemon zest. Toss with spaghetti. A squeeze of lemon over the top. Do not apologize to anyone. The directive was underlined. There were more. Lemon chicken with green olives and roasted grapes. Plum cake for after you finally say the thing you meant to say in April. In the margins, remember to salt from above. Don't reach for your phone while the onions are sweating. They hate that. I closed the book and held it in my lap, the way you hold a cat that might scratch. The air smelled of laundry detergent and someone else's patience. My life, arranged neatly around my own suitcase and my own preferences, black coffee, white cotton sheets, a loyal fear of group activities, suddenly went a bit soft at the edges. I know what you're thinking. You don't fall in love with a man because he owns an apron and writes affirmations to his onions. I agree. You fall in curiosity with him. Which is worse? The next morning, I called baggage irregularities to see if anyone had come looking for me. They hadn't. I felt oddly disappointed, not because I expected him to show up at my door with flowers and luggage. The airline had already promised me a courier, not a reunion scene. But because his silence left me feeling less like a person and more like a character I had invented after too much coffee. Give it another day, the woman said. Oh, I can give it several, I replied, with the kind of breezy patience I absolutely did not feel. The truth was, I could barely give it until lunch, My talent for waiting hovers somewhere between poor and catastrophic. I hung up, made coffee, and because I am a responsible citizen with a hearty respect for moral grayness, I found the playlist on my phone and pressed play. Heroes put on its cape. Lark ascending lifted the curtains. I set water to boil and toasted breadcrumbs, the color of maps to places you'll never go. Was I wrong to cook a stranger's recipe? The act had the flavor of trespass, but he, whoever he was, had written them as if for the public good. In my defense, it felt less like I was using his belongings and more like we were meeting in a kitchen the size of a thought. While the pasta cooked, I read a few notes to self. On the train to Genova, I saw a man hold his wife's elbow as if it were a bird he intended to release. I forgive myself for throwing away the frying pan with my ex. There are some things you shouldn't share. Buy flowers on Mondays. I am the kind of woman who does not buy flowers on Mondays. Mondays are for proving I can survive without softness. And yet, there it was, a stranger telling me, with the authority of a man who salts from above, to reconsider my whole arrangement with life. I ate the spaghetti standing at the counter. It tasted like the promise of being forgiven. It tasted like a person who understood that some evenings required salt and heat and the courage to eat alone without apologizing for it. By the second day, I had read the notebook cover to cover, including an entry that stopped me cold. July 10th. Couldn't sleep again. Baked plum cake for the girls, who found it waiting at breakfast and ate it like it was a secret they were allowed to keep. Realize it's been 10 years since she died. I do fine until the weather changes, and then I don't. That she dropped into me like a rock in a calm pond, and the ripples kept going. It is one thing to imagine a man who writes playful notes to himself about onions. It is another to picture him in the kitchen at 3 a.m., sleepless and solitary, turning grief into plum cake so that in the morning his daughters would find sweetness waiting for them instead of silence. I closed the notebook and zipped the suitcase, apologizing aloud to no one. That afternoon, the phone rang. "Baggage irregularities," a man said. "We have your match. We'll send someone to pick it up and deliver yours." And that was that. I looked at the suitcase one last time. The apron folded neatly, the shoes paired together like stern parents. The notebook sat where I had left it, elastic stretched, pages brimming with someone else's life. I knew I had no right to take more from it. But perhaps I had the right to leave something behind. So I found a piece of stationery and wrote a note, careful not to sound like someone who had wandered too far into another's private rooms. Just a quiet knock on the door I would never open. To the life I borrowed for 2 days. I'm sorry. I opened the notebook. I cooked your pasta. I listened to your playlist. I read about the girls, about July 10th, about her, and it unsettled me in ways I didn't expect. Your recipes behave, just as you promised. Your songs kept me company, and your notes, buy flowers on Mondays, don't apologize, made me reconsider the kind of life I've been arranging for myself, one where I survive mostly on grit and sarcasm. So I wanted to leave something behind too. You wrote that some nights are louder than others, that the dark doesn't always let you sleep. For that, I offer you a piece of music. Bach's Goldberg Variations, the Aria, from Glenn Gould's 1981 recording. It's the opening and the ending of the whole work, written centuries ago to soothe an insomniac through the night. You can hear the pianist humming along, imperfect and human. It has steadied me on nights when my own thoughts refuse to sleep. Maybe it will keep you company too. If your suitcase gave me anything, it was this. The reminder that we're known as much by the small, ordinary things we choose. Recipes scribbled in margins, playlists for endurance, notes to self, as by the headlines of our lives. Now you know one small thing about me, just as I know a few about you. And maybe that's enough. Take care of your girls, keep salting from above, and please keep buying flowers on Mondays. M. I folded the note carefully, as if the creases themselves mattered, and slid it between the notebook's pages, not on top, not too deep, just tucked like a pressed flower where it might be found or might flutter loose one day. It felt less like trespassing and more like leaving something small on a windowsill, a gesture that could be ignored or kept or carried forward. Then I zipped the suitcase shut, sealing it like a secret. That evening, a man in a reflective vest arrived, businesslike. He lifted the suitcase from my hallway and set mine in its place. The whole exchange lasted less than 2 minutes. He didn't even ring the bell properly, just one polite press, as if to say, nothing personal, just luggage. And that was the end of it. At least on paper. I don't know if he ever found my note. I don't know if he read it, or if one day he turned a page and paused over the handwriting of a stranger. But I like to imagine he did, that he played the aria late at night, maybe even heard Gould humming and felt a little less alone. Because sometimes all we can give each other are fragments. A song, a recipe, a sentence folded into a notebook. We never know if they land or how, but we send them anyway, hoping that in the quiet hours, someone might feel less solitary because of us. The wrong suitcase gave me a life I'll never live, a man I'll never meet. But it also gave me a chance to leave behind a note, a fragment of myself. And sometimes, fragments are all we have. What happens when a stranger's story begins to echo your own? When something you were never meant to find ends up changing the way you see yourself? When Maya first told me about the wrong suitcase, she asked me to help her shape it. A quiet accident that became something else entirely. A reflection on curiosity, loneliness, and the small, tender ways we reach for connection. For privacy, names and identifying details have been changed. In the conversation you're about to hear, Maya and I talk about those 2 days she lived with a stranger's suitcase, what she discovered in its pages, and how even brief encounters, the ones that never resolve, can leave a lasting mark. Maya, thank you so much for asking me to tell this story for you. Now you've just heard it read out loud. How was it for you? You know, hearing your experience shaped into this kind of story.
Oh gosh. It's strange, isn't it? I mean, you recognize yourself, but also you don't. I felt almost like I was eavesdropping on my own life. I mean, there were parts that made me laugh, like the shoes that had never met my feet. And then parts that, hurt a little. The plum cake part, that still lingers.
When you first realized you had taken the wrong suitcase, what was your very first reaction?
My first reaction, I guess I would say it was panic. And then this very smug voice in my head going, well, that's what you get for thinking you're competent at airports. But once I opened the suitcase and saw the notebook, the panic gave way to, I guess I want to say curiosity, which of course is its own kind of danger.
Curiosity seems to be at the heart of this whole story. What made you open the notebook when you knew you probably shouldn't?
Well, I wish I could say I resisted. But as you know, the truth is, it was sitting there like an invitation. And I thought, one page, just one. But as you know, recipes and music, well, they are like little trap doors into a person. And so once I read one, I just couldn't stop.
Was there something in his notebook that felt like it was written directly for you?
Actually, yeah, there was. There was this line about buying flowers on Mondays. I know it sounds silly, but I've always denied myself small softnesses like flowers. And reading that from him, it was like a nudge, Like he was telling me it's okay to choose gentleness.
The plum cake entry seems to be the one that really sat with you. Can you talk about that?
That was the one that broke me. You see, I could picture him, 3 a.m., can't sleep, still grieving. And instead of collapsing under it, he makes cakes for his daughters. And if that isn't love, then I don't know what is.
Mm-hmm.
It was quiet and practical and unspectacular, but it fills the room anyway.
You decided to leave him a note in return. What made you want to give something back?
Because otherwise, it would have felt like stealing. I mean, I had taken so much already. I mean, his grief, his music, his reminders. I didn't want to just vanish like that. Leaving the note was my way of evening the scales just a little bit, even if he never read it.
So you chose to give him a piece of music, Bach's Goldberg variations, the Aria. Why that one?
Because he wrote about not sleeping, and I thought, here is something that might actually help. You see, Bach wrote it for another insomniac centuries ago. And in this recording, you can hear him humming. It's so human and so frail. And I wanted him to feel that. I wanted him to know that someone had thought of his nights.
Do you think he ever found your note?
I don't know. And honestly, I don't think I want to know. You see, the not knowing keeps it alive. If he found it, great. And if he didn't, maybe that's okay too. Because the act of writing it changed me, even if it never reached him.
Did this experience change you in some way?
I think it did. It made me less afraid of paying attention. Like, I realized how much intimacy lives in the small things, like what songs you choose, how you cook pasta, what you admit to yourself in the margins. It reminded me that lives brush against each other all the time, and even by accident.
Okay, my last question, Maya. If you could say one more thing to the man who owned the wrong suitcase, what would it be?
Well, I think I already said it in the note. But maybe I would add, your suitcase reminded me that I'm still capable of tenderness, even when I least expect it. So thank you, whoever you are.
There's something about stories like Maya's. They never really end, do they? They linger in the corners of our thoughts, in the small hours of the night, reminding us that connection doesn't always need a conclusion. Maybe that's the quiet magic of a story like this. It asks us to look at what we hold on to and what we're finally willing to set down. If the wrong suitcase made you think of a moment you've carried, a conversation unfinished, a chance encounter you still remember, I'd love to hear your story. You can write to me at sayonemorethingpod@gmail.com or visit ifIcouldSayOneMoreThing.com to share it. I'm Andrea Applewick, and this is If I Could Say One More Thing.